recording. And thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for being patient with me while I totally feck things up. We seem to be working now. Can everybody see the screen is the main thing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Right, so couple of things I wanted to cover. I was going to go delve into Amplify a little bit again. And if we've got the time, I also wanted to delve a bit into Blender and show how you can use the simplest of simple shaders that you can't get any more simple in Amplify, and baking all your lighting directly in Blender and using it with an unlit shader. We'll see how we get on. If we don't, I'll cover that next week. But what I wanted to do, because I know there will be some people who's new to creating their own shaders, this is by request. I know a lot of people are interested in Amplify Shader Editor. Apologies, it is a paid plugin for Unity. If you've got the funds to get it, I do recommend you get it. I also recommend you keep an eye on the Unity Asset Store, because it is often on sale and often at half price. So it's worth keeping an eye on it and getting it when you can. If you don't have Amplify Shader Editor, it is very similar to Shader Forge, which it's totally free. It isn't supported anymore. It is an old piece of software, but it still works with Unity. It works more like Unity's own built-in shader graph, which unfortunately we can't get working in Banter, so we've got to use third-party shader editors to create our own. There's lots of tutorials on YouTube about Shader Forge. Definitely worth a look at. I did do one session where I covered Shader Forge a bit. I'm happy to go into it into the future. If anybody's interested, we can look at it in the future. But for today, we're going to be concentrating on Amplify Shader Editor. I've already got it installed in, when I flip to it, my empty scene here. It's just like any other package that you download from Unity, whether it's free or paid. You go into the package manager. Once you've actually purchased it on the Unity store, it'll show up in My Assets, and you just search for it, type in Amplify, and there it is, Amplify Shader Editor. You just hit the import button and it'll bring the whole thing in for you. What I usually do is I hit import, and the first thing I do when it unpackages it, which takes a minute because I haven't got the fastest PC, is I untick examples, because you don't need all of these. If you're used to Amplify Shader Editor and you don't want to see examples, it does take up a hell of a lot of disk space and takes a long time to install, so don't bother with it. That's all I do, and then it just installs the bits that you need. So once you've got it installed, you will then see that you've got a new folder down here called Amplify Shader Editor that's got all your bits in. It's got examples there. I have installed the built-in examples anyway, just in case I want to have a look at them and see how they're made. It's always useful to do that, but you don't have to. First thing I would normally do is bring in an object to apply a material to while I play around with the shader. So I would normally just bring in something like a cube or a sphere. In this instance, I'm going to bring in a sphere. And I usually reset it to the center, so I know. Just right clicking here on transform and reset will set all of these position and rotation values and everything to 0 and the scale to 1. So there's our sphere. I'm going to create a material to go on it. Don't know what I'm going to call it yet because I don't know what I'm making. So we'll drag that on there. You'll now see if I click on the sphere under materials, it's got new material, which is the one I've just created here. Let's try and see if I can make that right and a bit bigger. I don't know if you can see that. I know I have got it quite small, but I'm really concerned I'm going to totally mess things up in Banter. I don't know how to. I wonder if it's in settings. I'll have to have a look at that for next time, see if I can adjust the size of the text in Unity for you. And then we need a shader to go on the material. So right click, create, and because I've got Amplify installed, I choose Amplify shader and surface. And I'm not going to name it again because I don't know what I'm going to call it, so it's just keeping its default name. But what I am going to do, I can rename it afterwards. What I am going to do is just go to the beginning there and type in Lisa with a /. And that way, when I save the shader, you'll see when I click on the material, under standard, I can go to Lisa, and there's mine. So if I put Lisa /, it gets its own section in the menu, and I'm not searching through all this stuff that's here. I just go straight to my name, and there's the shader that we've given it. At the moment, there's nothing in there. It's just a blank shader. But it's very much, it's node based. If you're familiar with Blender and the shading process in Blender, it's much the same. You've got your material output, your actual shader bit that does all the calculations, and then you just plug in all the things you need. Your colour, your roughness, your metallic, exactly the same. In Amplify, it's the same. We've got the albedo, which is the colour, the normal, emission, metallic, smoothness, ambient occlusion, etc. You don't need to really worry about these bottom things if you're going to be playing around with you know, vertices and stuff, and because you can create shaders that actually use vertex offset and will what's the word I'm trying to think of, animate vertices to make it look like an object's moving. You can do all of that in a shader, but when that's for the future. That's too complicated for today. So this is the basic thing. To add a new node, you would right click, and then you've got all of these different options, but there are hotkeys for the most commonly used nodes, which are an absolute time saver. So for instance, textures, there is a hotkey there for a texture sample node, which is T. So to use it, all you do is hold down the button T and click, and there you've got a texture sample node. You could do, for instance, a float, which is just a single value. You could put any number in there. That's a float. You could do, that's done using button 1. Button 2 will give you a vector 2, which will give you 2 values, which is useful if you want to move something around along the X and Y axes, or the U and V. If it's on you know, the UV coordinates, you would use that. You've got a vector 3, etc., etc. And that's just using the number keys. Another very useful one is O, and click, and that'll give you a 1-. And the reason that's useful is because Blender uses roughness maps, which you can see there, and you would plug in your grayscale map into that. However, Unity uses smoothness maps, which is basically the inverse of a roughness map. So anything that has a value of 0 needs to be 1, and anything with a value of 1 needs to be 0. And to convert it, to make an invert image, you would just use a 1- node. So you'd plug your roughness map into 1- and then plug that into smoothness, and it'll work just the same. Other useful nodes are the math nodes, so you could have M for multiply, A and click for add, S for subtract, etc. And we're going to use those in a little bit, and you'll see what I mean by how useful they are. But the very basic thing to start with is your colour. You'd normally plug that into the albedo and save it. You'd usually give it a name. If you don't give it a name, you will see when we click on the material, it's called texture sample 0. You don't know whether that's the colour, or you're meant to plug the roughness in there, or the normal, or anything. So we go into the shader and we just rename it to make it obvious for us. And I'm English, so I'm spelling colour with a U, and you'll just have to get used to it because that's what I do. And then you'll see when we click on the material now, it's got the name up here, colour. And it's got a box where you just drag your image. And that could be, you might not want an image, you might not want a texture image, you might just want a basic colour. And that's easily done. With that, you hold down the button 5 and click, and you get a colour node. And you can plug that into the albedo, give it any colour you like, we'll make it red. And there it is. We've got a red sphere. At the moment though, you can't change the colour in the material, and the reason is because here we've got this set as a constant, which means it's fixed. You program it into the shader and it can't be changed. That's how you want it to be, and it's never to change. If you want it to be a variable that you can change, you change this to property, and then you can save it. And then when we open the material, we've now got a colour that we can choose whatever we like from. We can make it green.
Lisa,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. I've been having to, the reason I've been running around the classroom is that there's an echo, and I have real problems close to, I'm hearing your voice and hearing it again through someone's mic. Is there a way to mute everybody? It's just, I've tried to go around the classroom and find somewhere quiet to stand. And
You're hearing it from Swifty.
Is it Swifty? Oh, for God's sake, seriously? I'm saying Swifty, I can hear this echo. I phoned him up to ask him, you little monkey.
Wait, what?
It's
Not
you.
from me.
Mute yourself.
I'm on the computer. I'm muted.
Yeah, but you have to mute if you're not with the headphones.
I'm muted in banter, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, but I can hear it. It's really, really difficult for me to follow you, Lisa. I'm so sorry, and I'm so desperate to hear this class.
Yeah, I have to
This is on
admit.
computer that's doing it.
There's more than one.
Oh,
Okay.
Is there anything like a mass mute at all?
Well, I can mass mute. It does mean that I'm likely to forget to unmute everybody.
They've done it.
Okay.
They've
Okay.
done it. Whoever did muted it. Oh, thank you so much,
Yeah.
guys. Sorry, I've got slight ADHD, and if I hear someone's voice twice, I'm losing my mind. And I'm running around the classroom like a demented one, trying to lose the sound. Thank you, whoever muted
I
yourself.
totally
Thank you.
understand.
I'm going to mute myself now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like I
don't
say, I
wanna
could
miss
have
the
muted
class.
everybody, but it means nobody
Yeah.
could have interrupted me to ask questions or anything. And then at the end of the class, I would have said, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, bye, because I would have forgotten to unmute everyone again.
Oh, bless you. Whoever muted, thank you. Because I'm really loving this, Lisa. Sorry. Right, I'll be quiet now.
That's fine, no problem. I do understand. It was really quiet for me, and once I get into it and totally carried away, I forget. I can easily forget about echoes. So, but there we go. Where were we up to? Yes, the colours. You can make them any colour you like now that we've exposed the property in the shader. Another thing you can do, you might have a texture that you like, you want to use, but you want to give it a colour tint. And for that, you would use, usually, I believe, an add node. And you would add the colour to the texture and plug that in. And if there's no texture plugged in, it's going to be basic white. Hang on, I'm not even sure if it is add, usually I just play around with them until I get what I want. But we're going to find a texture and use something anyway. Let me have a quick look. I did have something in me downloads here. I had this laminate floor thing. Let's just grab that. We'll use that. We'll drag that into here. And then under material, we'll drag the texture in. We've got the laminate floor, but we've also got that kind of teal colour that I chose added. We can make that white if we want. Make it black, which doesn't add anything because black has a value of 0. White has a value of 1, so it's adding, making it fully white. But you can still see that there's a bit of a wood texture there. And like I say, just play around with it, make it whatever colour you like. So that's useful to know. And then when it comes to the other maps, like I say, they're dead simple. You just bring them in, plug them in, but there's a little bit of jiggery pokery you have to do to make them work properly. So I will bring in these extra these extra images. So we've got ambient occlusion, and we've got a normal, and we've got roughness. And they're the all there. Now, to make them work properly in Unity, you need to tell them which is a grayscale map, which is a normal, which is a colour image. Ambient occlusion is grayscale because it's only got values between 0 and 1, and there's no colour in it anywhere like this. This is just black and white. So where it says sRGB, untick it and click apply. The normal, this one you need to tell it that it's a normal map and click apply. And this one you need to tell it it's a grayscale map, so untick sRGB and click apply. And that's all your map set up, ready to go. We know there's 3 more textures to apply, so we'll just hold down T and click 3 times, and we've got 3 more of these ready to go. So this is going to be, let's just move these ones up a bit because they're getting on my nerves. This one is going to be the normal. So here we need to rename it, let it know it's a normal map. Under default texture, where it says white, this basically is whatever colour, oh goodness, whatever colour you're telling it to be if you don't plug anything in. But because it's a normal map, we want to tell it that it's bump. And then lastly, where it says unpack normal map, just tick that. And that's that one ready to go. This one, next one is, what have I got? It was roughness, wasn't it? And ambient occlusion. So we'll do the roughness one. That one, because it has to be plugged into smoothness, we need a 1- node to invert the roughness to smoothness. So plug that into there. And then this one, in fact, we'll rename that as well to roughness. And then this one here just plugs straight into, have I used RGB? It doesn't matter whether you use RGB or RGB. If you've got alpha channels, it's important, but these don't have them. So I'm going to plug this one into ambient occlusion. And that should be that ready to go. So, just to avoid confusion, I'm going to delete these and just have the colour texture going in. Up here, you've got a little yellow dot. That means that the shader is not saved. So click that. It'll turn green and then you're safe to close it. And then if we click on the material, we've already got the colour in. It's now asking for the normal, which we'll plug in there. The roughness, which we'll plug in there. And the ambient occlusion, which I haven't renamed because I forgot. So I'm just going to call that AO, save it and close. And then we'll plug in ambient occlusion into there. You can see a little bit of a difference there. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but when I plug the ambient occlusion in, you can see it darkening those creases in between the boards a bit. So there is our PBR texture. I don't know if you can see where the light's shining. We've got a little bit of roughness, a bit of green there from the normal map. The roughness, I don't think it's really, there's not much in it to be honest, but it is having a very slight effect. To be honest, do we really need it? Well, because I'm anal when it comes to textures and I like to go for the most realism I can, I would say yes. But what I would say is probably not worth using the normal map. And the reason I would say that is because if you're going to be baking your lighting, which I always recommend, you're going to lose 99% of the effect of the normal map anyway, and it renders it kind of obsolete. So I wouldn't really bother with that. The reason I would always recommend baking your lighting is because if you don't, it has to rely on real-time light calculations. And if you're using a normal map, it also has to calculate the way the light is going to bounce off the surface of your object in real time as well. and it will affect your frame rate, especially if you're making larger environments. If you bake your lighting, all it's got to do is load in the light map, it applies it to the scene, Bob's your uncle. There's no real-time calculations to be had, and it will vastly improve performance. And it'll look awesome as well, because baked lighting, in my opinion, looks way better than real-time lighting. You're also limited to how many real-time lights you can have in a world. So I don't know if you've ever been anywhere on other platforms where they've had a number of real-time lights, and then you noticed in the corner of your eye certain lights were going on and off, and certain areas were like plunged into darkness, because your headset can only calculate so many lights at a time. I think that usually it's around about 6 real-time lights, and beyond that it's going to just it will decide which are the least important and turn them off. That can really mess with things as well. It can just make places look awful. So always bake your lighting is my recommendation. So for this, I'm going to get rid of the normal map because I don't want it. And now we're down to 3 textures in our material. I want to get it down to a minimum, but I still do want ambient occlusion and roughness. And this is where I also recommend packing all your grayscale maps into one texture. Every image has 3 channels, a red, green and blue channel. And every channel has essentially what is a grayscale map. And every pixel has a value between 0 and 1. So in the red channel, you'll have a grayscale map which is telling it for every pixel how much red needs to be in the image. Same for the green channel, same for the blue channel. And what you can do is make the most of that. You can piggyback off that and use those 3 channels instead of storing colour information. You can store things like roughness, ambient occlusion and metallic information. And what I like to make, and I've covered this before, apologies to anybody who's heard me say this a million times, but I like to use an acronym, ARM, A-R-M, for ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, which is to go into the red, green and blue channels. So I always put the ambient occlusion in the red channel, and so on and so on. So there are a few ways you can do this. If you know how to use an image editor, such as GIMP, you can do it. It's a bit of a pain in the backside. It takes a few minutes for every single image to do, but it is doable. So if I was to bring in this image here, you can see I've got red, green and blue channels, and each of these has got a grayscale map in it. I could decompose this image so that I get an image with 3 layers instead of 3 channels, and then you can copy and paste into each layer your ambient occlusion, your roughness and metallic, and when you're done with it you go to colours, components, recompose, and it'll create your image for you. It's a pain. It is a pain in the backside. There are also things that you can download, like the TCP channel packer, which TCP just stands for texture channel packer. There's lots of free stuff out there, external programs that you can use to pack your channels. There are free plugins for Unity that you can do it right within Unity. But to be honest, I prefer to do it in Blender. And the reason I prefer to do it in Blender is because I love Blender and I love the shader node system, and I love how it works, and I love how easy it is. And yes, thanks Swifty, it's fab. So what I would do in this instance is I'd bring up me, where was it? What was it called? Laminate floor. Bring up me textures again. I'd bring them directly into Blender. I'm not bothering with a normal roughness. Drag them in. And then because we don't have a metallic grayscale map, I'm going to create one. So I'm just going to add in an image and I'm going to call it metallic. I'm not sure what size these images are. I should have checked, shouldn't I? Let's have a look here. 2K. So I'm just going to resize this one. Image, resize, 2K. And that's that one. Kind of ready to go. And we've got it open here. We know it's black, so it's got a value of 0, so there is no metallic information going to be added, but at least we've got something to plug into the channels. So we'll plug in the colour. I'll just bring that down a bit so you can see our cube that we've plugged it into. And then these three, I'm going to pack them. And to do that, I'll get them in the right order. I know this is tiny, sorry, I'm going to zoom in a minute. So we've got the ambient occlusion and the roughness and the metallic, ARM. And then I'm going to add, so you would choose add, not a clue what it's under. I just search for it, click on search, and we need combine colour. And it's already got the channels here. So we plug in ambient occlusion into red, we'll plug in roughness into green, and we'll plug in metallic into blue. And then we're going to completely bypass the shader, which is this bit here, the principal BSDF. Let's just bring this over a bit so I'm not zoomed out quite so far. And we'll move this. I'm just going to plug this straight into the surface output. And essentially what that does is just give you an unlit shader, which is what we want because we don't want any lighting from the scene to affect our finished texture. We want it to just be these inputs and nothing else. So, in order to get this to work properly, I'm going to get rid of the cube and I'm going to add in a plane because we want it to be unwrapped like this as a plane to fill the whole texture. And go back into shading and we'll give it the material we've just created. We go up here to cycles. You always have to bake your stuff in cycles. So we change the cycles. I've changed to GPU for speed. If you have a compatible GPU, you can set that under preferences here. And under system, you can see I've got a GTX 1080 because I don't have a big fancy powerful GPU like other people with RTX cores, but this is perfectly good enough for what I need. It runs Banter, it runs Blender, it runs Unity. That'll do me. And I've got it set to optics here for the denoise option as well, so I can use my GPU to denoise. So once you've got that set up, we'll go down to bake, and here I'm going to just turn the margin size down to 0 because we don't need a margin because, and why isn't that showing up now? Because our plane is right up to the very edge of the UV space, so there's no border, there's no margin required. And once we've set that to 0, we change combined to emit because an unlit shader is basically the same as emission. And we're going to bake the emission, except because it's emit, we don't need all these samples to make it work. We'll turn off denoise, we'll turn that down. In fact, I'm just going to put in one. One will probably do, you know, it's just an unlit image it's baking. So it doesn't have to send loads of light rays in and sample it loads of times to get accurate shadows. It's unlit, so we'll just turn that to 1. and make sure that you've got an image to bake to. So we're going to create a new image texture, and we're going to call it what we're going to call it. What was it? It was I'm not bothering typing laminate. We'll call it wood packed. Wood packed. I'll make it the same dimensions as the other. It's not going to have an alpha channel, so we can untick that. So in order to bake your image, you want to select your object, select the image you want to bake to, and then hit bake. And it should just take a second, and there it is. There is our funky, weird coloured image. The reason it's weird coloured is because instead of having colour information, we've got ambient occlusion, roughness and metallic information, but it's still telling it for each channel how much red, green and blue is going to be in each channel. And when it puts it together, you get these weird psychedelic images. But that's fine, because we're going to split it up again in Unity and use all the different grayscale maps. So we'll save a copy into here, wood packed, and we'll go back to Unity. There is our fancy image. So if we edit our shader, we can then get rid of that and get rid of that. We'll bring in a new texture, which we're going to call the packed texture. And then we've already got red, green and blue channels. We can just plug them in where we want them. So red is ambient occlusion. Green is roughness, so that goes into the 1- to make it smoothness. And blue is metallic. And if we save it and edit our material, because it's not plugged in there, we put our packed image in and it comes to life. And there is our packed channel. Now what we can do, we probably need to tell it we're not using colour data. So let's just hit apply. That's more like it. It's not as shiny as it was, but we do have the ambient occlusion. We've got the nice dark spots there, like dark lines between the planks. It's got a very subtle shine, which is what it originally had. It wasn't like a mirror. The only thing it's missing is the normal map, but to be honest, I don't care. I really don't care. So I'm going to delete that because I can. And we can delete that. And we can delete that, because now all we're using is two images, one for the colour and the other for everything else except the normal map. So that is a good way of making the most of your the channels in your textures. And that will, because this image is still only a 2K image, whereas you had an ambient occlusion image which was 2K and a roughness which was 2K, and we've already cut that right down. We've halved it by combining those two into one. So that's as I say, I would recommend doing that. However, I know time's getting on, 20 minutes to go, and we haven't really done that much with Amplify yet. I've just waffled on about stuff that I'm passionate about and keep telling people to do, so I'll shut up and we'll do something else interesting. In fact, what I'll do is we'll start having a play around with moving textures around. So one of the nice nodes that's in Amplify is the panner node. This is cool, and you can plug that. This always goes into the UV node of every texture, so we can plug it into there and plug it into there. And if we select our textures, that's not going to work, is it? Let's just bring that up there. In fact, you know what, let's just save it and close it and edit directly in the material. There we go. Our laminate texture's not really showing up, and that's because we haven't got any UV information going into the panner node. So if you hold down U, you can bring up your texture coordinates. You can plug that in straight into UV, and there's our wood textures come back. And then we'll just move that out the way. We don't really need that for now. You've got these two other values in the panner node. You've got speed and time. Time, I would just plug in a time node. Again, all I did was right click and type in time and it came up. That's not what I wanted. Plug that straight into there. But speed, I don't know if you can see it because it is small even for my eyes, but right here you can see there's two values, and that's because a UV map has two sets of coordinates. There's your U coordinates, which corresponds to X, and your Y coordinates going up and down, which corresponds to, sorry, your V coordinates, which corresponds to Y in 3D space. So we need to be able to adjust two values. So we're going to add in a vector 2, and we'll hold down button 2 on your keyboard, not on the keypad, the one above all the letters, and click, and you get a vector 2, and we can plug X and Y into speed. And now we can play around with these, and hopefully you'll be able to see what's happening here. If I was to start increasing this value, you can see it's sliding along. We can increase this value on the Y, and now it's going diagonally. If we set this back to 0, now it's just going up and down. I'll set this to 1 just because. I'm also going to make this a property, and we're going to call it speed. So that exposes this in the material, and we can adjust it in real time in the material. And if we go close this and go back, whoa, that's fast. But you can see we've got speed here, and if I change this to 0.5, that's half speed, 0.25, 0.1, and we've actually got an animated texture on there. What else could we do? You could play around with. You could maybe add in some noise, perhaps. This is always fun. Let's try adding in a if I can spell it, a Voronoi node, which I always think looks like frog spawn when it's working. And we'll just expand that so you can see it. We'll also plug in the UV coordinates that we had up here, because that's asking for UV coordinates. We've also got angle and scale, which we can play around with. So I'm going to make these floats, just single values. We'll bring in 2 of those, and we'll plug that one into angle and that one into scale. And then so we know what they are, and so we can change them. We'll change that to property and call it angle. And we'll change that to property and call it scale. And then I think what I'm going to do is just unplug this for now. We'll try combining them in a minute, but we'll just plug that into the albedo, and we'll have a look at that. See what we can do here. If we change angle, doesn't do much yet, so we'll leave that as 0, and we'll play with it in a bit. If we change scale, there we go. Now we're getting something interesting happening, and we could change angle, which makes it, that's why I say it reminds me of frog spawn when you play with this. Now this bit is quite fun to play with. If we open up the material again, instead of having a float as the angle, we could put in a time node. Nope, not that. Try again. Time. So over time, it's going to adjust the angle. And for that, I'm going to, I can't expose that, so I obviously need another float, which I can plug in there. That one I can expose, and I'm going to call this Voronoi time. Or it could be cells time or whatever. And then Voronoi time, we can adjust how fast it's going to move. The higher we turn it, the faster time passes. And we can adjust the size of those cells to however big or small we want them. And that's got quite a nice organic look to it. I think I'll
Question
unhook
for you:
these.
is that only on the outside or the inside of the sphere?
It's only on the surface of the sphere, on the normals. It's just a
only the surface
shader
it is.
that we've
Okay.
applied,
Okay.
just like a colour or a texture. So that's that. We could try applying some colours to this. So we could try multiply. And we can plug in the outer there and multiply it with a colour. So 5 for a colour and plug that into there. Plug that into the albedo. We'll just move that down and we'll adjust the colour and see what we get. So anywhere where it's white, because white has a value above 0, it's multiplied that value with the red. Anywhere where it's black, because it has a value of 0, it doesn't affect it. So black stays black and red becomes red. And we can, again, expose this and call it Voronoi main colour. And then if we want the dark bits to change, we will probably use an add node. So A, we'll plug that into there and we'll add another colour and plug that into there. And then we'll make that another colour here. That's not what I wanted. Come on, Lisa. Try that. Pull that down. And now we've got the black bits are blue. And here the red bits. Now this is the bit I always get confused with. Do we multiply them together? Do we add them together? I have no idea. Because this is where my brain starts to freeze up. Because maths was never my strong point. So I'm going to try multiply because that's the best way with Amplify. If you don't know what anything does, just try it out and have a play. But you'll find when you bring a node in, there's always this thing at the top that explains to you what it does and has a little blue link for online reference. And if you click that, you get a description and an example. And you can follow this and see exactly what it does, which is awesome. It's very cool. And that's for almost every node in Amplify. It's so useful. There it is for the add node. Excuse me. Here it is for the panner node. You get examples of how to use that. Well worth having a look at everything on every node you can find. But I'm going to try multiplying them together and see what happens. That's not quite what I wanted. It's still red, but it's got black dots and it's like a dark red. So I think what I probably should have done was add. I might actually need a lerp node, but we'll have a look at that in a moment. And that doesn't quite do what we wanted either. So in this instance, I think I probably am going to use a lerp node.
Can I also say something?
Yes, of course.
You can flip the values of the main one first and then just do the multiply again and then add them afterwards.
Right. Okay. So suggestions? Would I use a 1 minus for that like I would flip the grayscale maps?
There's a flip node.
Is there? Right, okay. You see? Oh, what have I done? What have I done? Every day is a school day. Flip. Okay. So I would flip this one.
No, you'd flip the white and black one.
Ah, this one here.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
Unless that's only for coordinates.
I don't
Might
know. Shall we try plugging it in?
Yeah, okay. I think it's only coordinates.
Ah, right, okay. Okay. Shall we try a 1 minus just to see what
Yeah,
it
you can
does?
try.
Oh, that didn't seem to do much either, did it? See, that's just inverting the colours. So blues turn into yellow. Yeah.
What if you do it on the black and white one?
Yeah. Okay.
And now multiply with the blue.
Okay. So if I get rid of that, add another multiply with the blue. Okay. And then see, this is the difficulty, getting these to merge together. This is why I thought I probably need a lerp node, and because it needs an alpha, I would use this. Plug that into there and that into there. But that's still not quite right. Well, I can't remember how I did it. I wonder if no, haven't a clue. Let's try multiply again. I've done this before, you know, but like I say, maths is absolutely not my strong point. That's not what I wanted. Get rid of that. And now it's just black. So,
You probably want to change that back to add
yeah.
the second one. I mean the lower one, because you still have it on multiply.
Right. I'll just move that down there. That with that. Yeah. I wonder if I just needed to flip the values for the lerp. Put that in there. Try that and that. That's not it. So try putting that one in the bottom and that one in the top. And that's not it. Okay, we'll figure that out for next week. Never mind. I'm just getting myself confused with that. Let's just delete all of these. And we'll open up GIMP. Because it's free. And I do try to use free things wherever I can. We'll create a tiny little image. So I'm going to make it 128 by 128. And I'll just zoom in a little bit on it. And I'm going to choose the fill tool. Well, it's the gradient tool. It's also bucket fill. Usually there's a little arrow where you can choose between bucket fill and gradient. And I want it to be not linear. Linear gives you this kind of thing for a gradient. I don't want that. I want bilinear, not that one, bilinear. And we'll start off somewhere in the centre, and if I hold down, I think it's control, it keeps it reasonably straight and just snaps like in angular increments. So we'll just drag down and create this kind of gradient here. And I'm going to export it as a PNG. I'll call it Pulse. I've covered this before as well, but it is so cool. I think you'll like it. And we'll pop it into Banter Projects. What did I call this one? Temporary. Because I run out of ideas what to call my tutorial files. and it's in Assets, Export. So now, if I close the shader, we've now got this thing here. So I'll open up the material and I'm going to just drag in the image because I can't be bothered to do it the long way around. Plug that into, in fact no, we'll plug it into emission because we want this to be a pulse that's kind of shining, and we can add a panner node again, plug that into the UV, and we can add some UV texture coordinates. Again, I'm using all the hotkeys, so this is T and the click for a texture sample node. Panner doesn't have a hotkey, I don't think. Texture coordinates is U for UVs, so just hold down U and click. We'll plug UV into UV and move that out of the way so I don't get confused. Again, we want a couple of floats. Well, we don't, we want one for speed. We just want a time node for time. Although, to be honest, you probably don't even need that. You could do without it. But the float we definitely need. So we'll expose that and call it speed. And we'll save that. So now, if we adjust the speed, we've now got a pulse that's going down the object. And a pretty cool thing to do, what I like to do, is go into Blender. We'll just use this plane because we need something to draw on. I'm going to add a curve. Any curve will do. I'll use a path. Go into tab, select everything, delete the vertices, go into top view, and while you're still in edit mode, down here there's a little pencil or a pen which says draw. So I'm going to draw a curve onto there. Normally you'd choose surface, but because I was in orthographic view, it drew on the surface anyway. If you don't choose surface, it'll just draw in space and be weird. But if you're not in orthographic view, try and remember to hit surface like I didn't, and then it'll draw on your plane properly. So we've got the curve drawn. I'm going to go into the curve properties, and then I want it to have as little geometry as possible because it's all about optimization for VR. So I always turn the resolution down. We'll hide the path now, the plane rather, and it looks all janky and angular. Just crank that up a bit until it's like as low as you can get away with. You don't want it to be too high. I'm happy leaving it like that. And then under geometry, again, crank your resolution right down. When you start increasing the depth on the bevel, you'll see if I change this to, let's just come out of there. If I change this to shade flat, you'll see that it's got 4 sides. It's like an extruded cube. And the more you increase this, the more sides you get. I normally don't go any higher than 6 for most things. I try and keep it as low as possible. And to be honest, 4 you can get away with, because by the time you've smoothed the shading, you can't really tell anyway. But if you want it to be just that bit more accurate, just turn it up 1 or 2. So there is what kind of looks like a pipe. I'm going to convert this to a mesh. And then if I select everything and zoom in on it, I'm not going to unwrap the whole thing, and because I'm going to end this with this snaky thing here, I'm just going to leave it like that. Because the pulse is going up and down, we're probably going to want to rotate this UV by 90, but we'll see. I'm going to export it as it is to start with. So F4 is a good shortcut. F4, E for export, F for FBX, nice and easy. Select objects, mesh, and we'll go into our folder, temporary assets. I'm going to call it pipe, export, and then back into Unity. We'll get rid of this sphere. We'll bring in our pipe, and it's vanished. There it is. It's not, wasn't exactly what I wanted. Let's just get rid of that. It's made it tiny because it's supposed to have a scale of 100. Because I've exported it from Blender. It's always, if you change it back to a scale of 1, it's going to be 100th of the size it should be. So we'll drag on our material, and the pulse is going the wrong way. So it is what I thought. We want the pulse to go down the length of the pipe. So we'll go back to Blender and into UV editing. If we select everything, R for rotate, and just type in 90 and enter, that's rotated the UV. So if we export it again as pipe, using the same shortcuts, F4, EF for export. You can do the same for import, by the way, F4, IF, and you can import stuff really quickly. But we're going to export it as pipe. Ooh, goodness, that's not what I meant. There we go. And now we've got it, something that's going way, way, way too fast. So I'm going to go to the speed, and we'll change that down to 0.2. But we've now only got one pulse, which is kind of stretched and going along the full thing. So what we can do is go back to Blender, into the UV editing, and I'll just scale it up by maybe 4. So the pulse is actually going to repeat. This is the texture, and it's going to be repeating across it. So export it again. And we now have a pipe with a pulse. And then the only thing left is to give the pipe the colour we want, the pulse the colour we want, and Bob's your uncle. That's the easy bit. So we'll open up the material again. We're going to choose a colour for the pulse, and we're going to multiply those together. Remember, it's multiply we're going to use, because anything with this value of 0 isn't going to do anything. Anything above 0, it's going to multiply that value by the colour. So anything that's white is going to get a colour if you multiply. So we hold down M for multiply, plug that into there, that into there, that into emission. And we're going to expose this colour so we can adjust it in the material. We'll just leave it as colour. Save that, and we'll give that a try. So under colour, we're going to make it, maybe this orangey colour looks quite nice. Nice and bright. Orange. And we'll also increase the speed a bit, because I quite like that. And then we just need to change the pipe colour. And for that, it's easy as can be. Open up your material. 5 for a colour. You could add a texture if you wanted, if you've got your own texture for the pipe, do that. I'm just going to, for simplicity, use a colour, plug it into the albedo. And so this one here, the orange, I'm going to change that name to pulse colour. And this one, I'm going to expose as a property and change that to pipe colour. Save that. And now under pipe colour, we can make it whatever colour we want. We've got a blue pipe, we've got a green pipe. Oh, we can just make it black. And we can, I've just realised it's 8:05 and I do apologise. We'll finish up here.
You're good, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's basically it. That's an introduction to some of the cool things that you can do with Amplify anyway. One of the favourite things I like to do is make things like portals and whirlwinds and stuff like that. So if anybody is interested, we can have a play around at making some kind of portal with maybe some weird rays coming out or some lightning or something. I think that would be quite cool to do. But this is just a basic introduction.
Awesome.
Yeah, I will stop the recording now because we're over time. I do apologise if anybody wanted to be off.